This is the rhetorical analysis of Auli'i Cravalho's chapter in the book American Like Me. We're first going to take a look at the past structure of the text, the purpose, audience, speaker, and situation. So the speaker of the text is Auli'i Cravalho, and she tries to set up to her audience of people like her that come from different cultures that they're not alone, and that they have to fight for their culture. They have to fight to let their cultures shine through them, to find who they are, no matter the criticism of others, no matter what they face. And there is no specific situation that the writer presents. It is a description of how she transitions from being someone that hasn't found who she is to someone that is proud of who she has become. As the text begins in paragraph 1, we see that the author employs a flashback strategy. So she depicts to the reader through her own eyes as a child how fun and adventurous it was. And she does this through the use of very descriptive imagery. We can see examples like the sun in my eyes, the bright, robust, tasting, running, sweaty, face flushed, barefoot, and others. And she uses this to let us see through her eyes, to let us have a first-hand experience of her childhood. She also employs the use of a parallel structure and a personal tone with the extensive use of I did this, I did that. For example, she says I slept, I held, I begged, I read. So this lets us know who she is. So she's developing this inner credibility towards the reader. She's introducing herself to the reader. And at the end of this very paragraph, she tells us one of the main things that her story is about. At this point in her time as a child, she thinks she knows exactly who she was. But we're going to see that this is going to be a theme that changes throughout the text. This is going to change. She's going to have fallbacks and she's going to rise. Then as we reach paragraph 2, instead of just focusing on one specific period in her childhood, she focuses on various of these. So at one point, she talks about how she was when she was 5 years old, when she was 16 years old, when she was 7 years old, and how her perspective on things changes as she grew up. Like when she was a 5-year-old, she used to use stickers to decorate, but as she grew up to be a 16-year-old, she used to use Times New Roman font to write essays. So as this perspective changes, which is an analogy to how her perspective of who she is changing, we can see that since before she knew exactly who she was, she thought she knew. Right now, as she's growing up in the double digits, she realizes that who she is not exact at all. It is very changing. It's not exact. It's not static. As we continue to paragraphs 3 and 4, the writer again shifts to a flashback to a specific point in her life that let us know how proud she is of her culture, how proud she is to share who she is with others. She uses terms like a parallel structure of I shared, I told, I did this, I did that, of very open verbs, which let us know how open she is to others when talking about herself and when talking about her culture. Then she employs the use of comparisons. She starts shifting into this specific scenario, which we're going to see now, of a comparison with her classmates, how different she is from her classmates because she comes from a variety of cultures like the Portuguese, Hawaiian, Chinese, and the others that she comes from. And now, as we continue, we enter this dialogue section, which is a shift in her conveying to her reader who she is. So she's gonna show us this first-hand experience that forever changed her perspective on who she was. And in this experience, she is criticized by a classmate because she doesn't look like she is from any place at all. She doesn't look exact. She doesn't look like she comes from any specific place. And the purpose of this is to show the reader that if she fought for herself in this example, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't someone that comes um, from Cuba that goes to the United States and doesn't speak English, why wouldn't that person fight for themselves? So that is what she's trying to convey to the reader. And she does this by using very specific imagery like language. She's expressing how she felt at that exact moment. She smiled tightly, shrugged her shoulders, eyes narrowed, looking around. She shows how she was shamed for who she was, as she wants others like her to know that there's nothing about wrong about their cultures. They have to be proud of their cultures. And then here she lists all of the cultures where she comes from: Puerto Rico, Portugal, Hawaii, China, and Ireland. Then as we reach paragraph 6, we start seeing the thinking that the narrator employs when it comes to this situation. And she does this through the extensive use of metaphors, personifications, and her privilege to show how angry she was at that classmate for putting her down and shaming her in front of others for her culture. For example, she uses the phrase "table was searching eyes, lips pressed, hit my flaming cheeks." So a very descriptive language. Then she uses a very humorous and informal language to show her cultures behind her roots. She's letting them shine. Like when she says, "make her eat her words." We could take it at recess when she is insinuating a fight because she is willing to fight for her culture. She's willing to let those cultures shine through. So we're starting to see a shift in her thinking. We're starting to see that she's finding herself, that moment with that classmate, forever changed who she was and who she thought she was. Then as we reach paragraph 6 and 8, this is like the full circle. We start from a place where she didn't know, where she knew where she thought she knew who she was. Then we move to a place where she realized that who she was is not exact. And then we come to a place where she's being the young adult, but she realizes who she is exactly. So she realizes who she truly is. And she does this by portraying how proud she is of her cultures with the repetitive use of "I am proud of it" and the word pride. And with the "if I could, I would" structure, which by utilizing "if I could go back to that moment with that classmate, I would change how I express myself. I would be more proud. I would be less shy. I would be less shamed." With phrases like she'd say, I'd say this very hypothetical scenarios that show us how her mentality and her perspective on that specific scenario has changed. So now we see the full transition throughout the text and what she's trying to convey to her readers, to her people like her, to people that come from various cultures, that they're not alone and they have to be like her. They have to fight for themselves. So overall, the structure of the passage is starts out with a flashback. She lets us know who she is, how fun her childhood was. She's building a very connection with the reader. She's letting the reader know who she is. Then she starts moving on to various parts of her childhood, letting the reader know how her perspectives changed through her childhood as she grows up. And then she presents the reader with this experience that she had that impacted her very deeply in finding who she was, that led her to the realization of the fact that she should not be ashamed of who she is. She should be proud to show her culture in her, to let her culture shine through. And that is it for the analysis of this text. Thank you for listening.